This story, like all good stories, starts with me half drunk swaying at a party. I'm talking to this guy, we're chewing the fat, getting on to the topic of souls, talking about how cool Gale is, how shit the Bed of Chaos is, why Dark Souls 2 is the best game of all time. Then eventually Sekiro comes up. He's like, yeah, Sekiro is my favourite game in the series, and my worst nightmare had come true. I begin to freeze up, my hands are sweating. Yeah, I never finished Sekiro. Suddenly, the whole room's gaze is upon me. I fled from the scene humiliated, and every second for the last year I relived that moment. My shame, it haunts me. Now, don't get me wrong, it wasn't for a lack of trying, but the combat never clicked for me. And I was okay with this, but it was always there, niggling away at me. Everyone is aware it's the most unique game in the series from most standpoints. The story, player character, and gameplay are all presented in a fashion that's left field when compared to the other games in From's library. Despite my best efforts at getting into the game, I only ever made it to Ashina Castle, and I hit the wall when I was fighting this guy, General Kuranosuke Matsumoto. Just declared war on Japan with my pronunciation then. And I eventually just packed it in. I haven't touched the game since. However, I decided to change that, and the result of my first real playthrough of Sekiro ruined Elden Ring for me. It was baby steps as I started a fresh save and made my way through the outskirts. Things were going well, I was killing basic enemies and defeating the generals. I could hear the screams of a coked up Randy Savage coming from up the stairs, and oh yeah, things were about to get real. This is a terrible mini-boss this early in the game for new players. My monkey brain didn't realise you could deflect his attacks, because you know, people's elbow isn't the same as a sword. Look at those grab hitboxes, man. Fuck! Come on! And this brings me to one of two things that I do dislike about this game. The mini-bosses eat fucking ass, okay? I don't know how the main bosses are flawless, except for one. But the mini-bosses comprise some of the most annoying fights in the game. Raging Bull feels out of place mechanically. These Princess Mononoke rejects are annoying as fuck. And Seven Spears is law-breaking, man. These guys are so strong, Ashina would never fall while they're defending it. Despite this, however, the Ogre didn't give me too much trouble, and I made my way to Ashina Castle. You hear that? Give me your name, Horsemaster, and I shall give you mine. This is a cool first boss. The spectacle, the arena, it's a good challenge for the start of the game, but forgiving enough that he won't make you rage quit. It encourages a mixture of attacking and deflecting, but I knew what was coming up. My palms were sweaty, knees weak, prosthetic arms heavy. Despite getting fucking glacked once or twice, my skills had doubled since the last time we met General. And like that, I'd set a new record for the furthest I had got into Sekiro. Now what do? I keep my expectations very low for myself with these types of videos. You're probably thinking, this is the point where he gets stuck like a scrub for the next 2 minutes. And you're right. After borrowing the anal bead from this old dear, I found myself at Hirata Estate. This is obviously a bit of a step up from the outskirts. I sloppily carved my way through the bandits. Using hit and run tactics, I easily managed to beat this fat bastard guarding the entrance. And this was it. This was the moment that I hit the wall. The Lady Butterfly fight. Now, I've seen a lot of people say that Genichiro is the click moment. I'll get to him later. But this is where shit got fucking real for me. Up to this point in the game, I think the combat is a bit more forgiving to new players, more specifically Souls players, who are conditioned to play in a way that simply will not work in Sekiro. I think the game lets you get away with dodging and deflecting less early on. You can play a little bit more like you would in Dark Souls, but you can't do that here with the Lady Butterfly fight. I'm sure there is a cheese for her, but I'm coming at this as a complete noob on their first playthrough. You have to get good. It took me probably about half a dozen attempts to even figure out what I was supposed to be doing, whittling down the health so I could deplete her posture bar more efficiently, and I died a lot. Now, you're probably wondering, what does any of this have to do with ruining Elden Ring? Well, Laurie, I'll tell you. Despite my failures, I was actually having fun in Sekiro. Each time I had died, I felt like it was my fault. But I was always excited to get back into the boss room and keep fighting. The learning curve was brutal, but it was also fair. I never really got this feeling in Elden Ring. Often I felt like the game had cheated me. The learning process in Elden Ring wasn't fun or satisfying, and I think a simple answer like change your whole build or use a spirit ash is putting a plaster on the gaping wound of an issue with Elden Ring. Let's take Margit as an example, the first major boss you're likely to face. If you're on a melee build, his borderline input reading behaviour is just not fun. You have to bait 2 moves where you might be able to get an attack in before he instantly winds up another 10-hit combo. It encourages a very passive playstyle of waiting for your turn. A lot of bosses are like this in Elden Ring. There are very few that I would consider to be good, let alone great. I would be interested on doing an underrated Elden Ring boss video because my choices might be polarizing. There was just something about the rhythmic back and forth in the Lady Butterfly that got my adrenaline going. I like how even... Fucking can't talk today. Fuck. I like how even when you play defensively in Sekiro, you're still attacking. Sekiro walks a line of demanding proactive and reactive gameplay from the player. It's why when I defeated Lady Butterfly, I felt a sense of achievement. Whereas a lot of the time in Elden Ring, it was more of a relief that it was over. Following Hirata Estate, I continued my way to the top of Ashina Castle. After passing the deflect check, it was time for Samurai Showdown 2 Electric Boogaloo. Now, Lady Butterfly is where the game clicked for me, but Genichiro is where I fell in love with the game. This guy nails early to mid-game boss design, forcing you to utilize every technique you've learned so far whilst making sure you've gotten to grips with the basics. My only complaint would be the bow spam, but once you realise that's to discourage you from playing passively, it's not really a problem. The fight really rewards aggression but not recklessness. My favourite part was when I beat him and the game was like bang, 3rd phase. This scared me, but surprisingly I was able to beat his 3rd phase straight away, even pulling off a cheeky lightning deflection. I had to catch up with my boy who gave me a shopping list of items to retrieve, the first of which was guided by this stupid monkey. I would be enraged beyond belief if I wasn't just laughing at the fact he slingshots his steaming hot shit at you.
Very nice.
This guy was giving me a bit of trouble, to be honest, to the point that I actually had to ask my subscribers for some pointers.
This guy stinks!
As it turns out, I wasn't using my prosthetics efficiently. To be honest, I'd only really used Shuriken consistently up to this point. Using the firecrackers rinsed his 1st phase. Oh yeah, sorry to disappoint, but there's no funny reaction to phase 2 because I knew it was coming. I then performed a colonoscopy to flush out the parasite, and the lily of the valley was mine. Ugh. My next stop was Senpo Temple, and this leads me to the second thing that bugs me in Sekiro. I feel like the game's combat system struggles when fighting more than one enemy. Like, how the hell were you supposed to fight these Foot Clan ripoffs? And my face did drop when I had to fight that fucking monkey again.
Fuck.
Only to get more annoyed when, for some insane reason, only known to the devs, they decided to make it a gang fight. It kind of belittles what's actually like a pretty good boss the first time round. Now, I'm not actually against recurring bosses in a story sense. I like how Genichiro reappears as your sort of nemesis, and although I don't like Morgoth, I like how he appears 3 times in Elden Ring to a similar effect. It gives you a bit more of a personal connection to them. After spending 10,000 human years in the spirit realm, I got hit with something I wasn't expecting back at Ashina Castle. Turns out Owl is still alive. I kind of already assumed this because I was sure he was the one that stabbed me in Hirata Estate. But instead of immediately getting thrust into the boss fight, I was presented with a choice. And this brings me to the second reason that Sekiro ruined Elden Ring for me. Souls games' stories are presented in a way that's vague and they require investigation to uncover. And I'm not shitting on that style, it's unique and I do like it. But what I like more in Sekiro is that the story is presented up front to the player so that they understand what is going on. Not so much so that it's cinematically driven, but just enough so it can still retain the illusion to more mysteries that you can unravel, whilst giving enough context to the story to keep you invested. Whereas in Elden Ring, most of the time you're not really sure what's happening. I'm not invested in the story of Elden Ring and its characters. So for example, let's take what I would consider to be the second act break for both games. I would consider Melena's sacrifice at the Forge this moment for Elden Ring, and the Iron Code choice for Sekiro's. You could probably debate this, like I'm sure some people might say that when you get to the Erd Tree and you find that it's covered in thorns and you can't get in as the second act break, but I make up the rules here, so fuck off. Now up to this point, I think that Kuro is actually a great character. I'm invested in his struggle with the divine heritage, and although you have the choice, I think the obvious pick is to side with him and kill Owl. For Sekiro and the player, this is a huge story beat because you're effectively going against your mentor and father, who totally came up with the Iron Code to manipulate you into doing his will, might I add. Sekiro and Kuro are both going against what is expected of them. Now, let's look at Elden Ring. I know this can vary, but assuming you still have Melina, most players will see her die here. Melina is effectively our companion for most of the game, and to be honest, I don't care about her. I know she has this thing about duty and her purpose to ignite the Forge, but as a three-dimensional character, she's just not there for me. It doesn't feel like a heavy-hitting sacrifice. I can appreciate Sekiro and Elden Ring are very different games, but the core FromSoftware philosophy is present in both. Therefore, the comparison is valid. That's not to say that Elden Ring doesn't have emotional moments or good characters. Blythe, Alexander, and Raya, these are all great characters, but obviously that's not the main story. Elden Ring also has like really interesting lore, but lore isn't a substitute for in-game story. But yeah, Owl fucked me into the dirt raw. At least a dozen deaths, if not more. I totally meant for that to rhyme when I wrote it. The bamboozles he pulls are a great example of the game being a dick in a good way. I was feeling confident with the combat by the time I defeated him, and I breeze through the next few encounters. Up to this moment, I hadn't really hit a point where the game had pissed me off. I hadn't rage quit, got mad, or cursed the game out. Then I got to the Demon of Hatred, and this gets my pick for the worst fucking boss in the game. Oh yeah, let's design a buttery smooth combat system and throw it in the bin for the second to last boss in the game. Like, what the fuck are you doing? My enjoyment at this point was gone. I just couldn't figure out what I was supposed to do, but I had a plan of the cunning variety. Now, because I'm the smartest man alive, I had already figured out that the sculptor was the demon, and I also picked up several beats about the whistle. And I was like, oh, so I played it safe, whittling him down, and from my calculations, he would stagger every sort of quarter of his health. I managed to get him to his last phase, and with the whistle, I absolutely violated him. I really fucking hurt him, mate. Trash boss. I will not elaborate further. My journey had almost come to an end, but I knew what was coming because I had heard tales of this legendary foe. And I'd really hate to disappoint you all, but Ishin was fucking easy. I had the mechanics down. I died once to him busting a nut in my ass.
You what?
Hang on. I died once to him busting a cap in my ass. Very honourable in the first phase, not this phase. Bang. And the second death was due to the old electro dubstep move that I just wasn't expecting him to use.
You like dubstep?
But there was just something satisfying about going through all of this struggle, learning the combat, and then I got to the last boss, absolutely dreading the encounter, and I just fucking skanked him in my third try. In summary, Sekiro managed to just hit all the right notes for me that Elden Ring had missed. Elden Ring's gameplay was just Dark Souls 3 with extra steps. The bosses weren't fun, and the story was weaker than previous entries. If I had played Dark Souls 3 in 2016, and then I went into a coma for 6 years, then woken up, played Elden Ring and Sekiro, I would think that Sekiro was the newer game. It feels like the logical next step in the evolution of FromSoftware games. It made me feel like Elden Ring was a step back in terms of innovation. The satisfying gameplay coupled with the story presentation, it just kept me entertained on all fronts. Although Sekiro is a shorter game, it delivers like a much more well-rounded and polished experience. To anyone who might disagree with me, let me just ask you one question before I leave. Are you still playing Elden Ring now, or have you gotten bored of it? Just let me know. Just type your little, get your little fingers typing in the comments. God, this video really sort of droned off, didn't it, towards the end, so I should probably stop talking.
This is pretty much the worst video ever made.